Back in 2006, there was an initiative. 2006 was just 3 years after our president was elected as the president of the Republic of Azerbaijan. And 3 years into his presidency, he initiated a very kind of quiet academic initiative, exercise. He asked the local academic institution, Azerbaijan Diplomatic Academy then, now ADA University, to bring together a group of scholars and to do some kind of research on, hypothetically speaking, if we are to resolve the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. What would be the plan to restore the area? So just hypothetically speaking, then the question was put in such a way that if the peaceful negotiations were to be successful, what would be the next step? What would the government do, and what would be the plan, the sequencing and actions, and whether there are any international best practices available in this area. So that study went on for quite a period of time, for about a year, involving very renowned scholars from the US and our local scientists. So they did this research, and they ended up with a book, which was then presented to Mr. President. And of course, that book then later was presented in many different countries, like Moscow, London, Washington, DC, and Istanbul, of course. So, it was translated into a number of languages, English, Russian, to my knowledge. So that book was there on the shelf for quite a long time. And of course, when the liberation did take place, the first thing Mr. President recalled was to look at that book. And we did find it. We brought in people who authored it. And of course, there was a special working group established to study. And then we disseminated that book to all stakeholders for them as an additional reading. Before all this planning and all this governance framework was started. To be completely frank, I have to say that the way the things evolved, we did not follow that book precisely. Of course, it provided us with the general approach, general framework. So we had to find a more tailored approach to the current circumstances. So we did try to understand the framework first. I think the most important matter in this at that time was how are we going to approach the process of reconstruction. So first and foremost important was what would be the governance framework, the framework through which we will manage the process. And that was important because it's just, you can imagine, building from scratch, completely vandalized, territories which are cities which are wiped out of earth. And that just requires some multidisciplinary approach, numerous size of stakeholders, numerous size of nuances to take into account, and it all really kind of gets interconnected like a domino effect. The moment you do something wrong, it will have consequences in many different areas, and that's why it was important to understand the governance framework. So once we set up the governance framework, we actually went on a very important self-exploration process, journey, because a lot of things we learned as we were doing in the process. So, and it just happened in such a quick way because I think all stakeholders were kind of open to ideas, to critical thinking, to being flexible, and being up to the point, trying to minimize the bureaucracy. That coordinating and participatory approach, I think, played a key role, in my view. You wouldn't believe that, but it is quite difficult for me to get enough sleep. And perhaps looking at me and my sizes, you can say that it's very hard to believe that. But I'll tell you honestly, this job is quite challenging, but at the same time so honorable that I don't regret a second of it. I really am honored, privileged that I'm here doing my contribution in the whole process, because we are the generation who witnessed these difficult hardships, difficult times when 20% of our territory was occupied. We are the generation which saw all this difficult, chaotic, politically unstable times when there were times when our statehood, the existence of our statehood was under threat. And only thanks to our great leader who returned to power and with the demand of our people, and who basically saved it. And coming from that time to where we now, we are also the luckiest generation who actually happened to witness all of that as well. You know, what happened after that. That 30-year of journey that really helped us to understand, that you can actually do a lot of things. You can achieve a lot of things if you put your mind into, if you consolidate, if you become a nation, if you really consolidate around the national idea. And that's what our great leader has taught us. This is what we learned from him. And of course, our president made sure that the new generation that came, during his presidency, that grew up, became the leading force, driving force, and the most productive force. They actually, take on this heritage and continue. I would say we have still quite a serious. This is one of the most important challenges that we're facing now. In terms of primary education, basic education, of course, Azerbaijan in that sense is very developed country that has achieved nearly universal literacy rate. But in terms of when it comes to vocational education or higher education, so that, especially in this category, is quite low. And of course, that has to be dealt with, and this is one of our objectives, because it's not enough to provide housing. It's also important, as you rightly said, it's also important to provide proper jobs, sustainable jobs. Jobs that make people happy, not just to earn their living. I'll give you statistics. When occupation happened, only 26% of now who we call formally internally displaced persons, only 26% of them used to live in urban areas. For 30 years, when they were forced to leave their native lands, they settled in urban areas. So most of them lived there for 30 years. New generation emerged in those areas. So right now we can say about more than 50%, 52% of them lived in urban areas for more than 30 years, and for some of them, their entire life. It sounded incredible to me as well at the beginning, but look at Aghdam now, for example, or Lachin to that matter. In Aghdam, we have Aghdam Industrial Park for 190 hectares. And the first phase of this industrial park was just 70 hectares. And right now it's full. There are about 19 enterprises, plants, factories, they're being built. 7 of them are ready. 2 of them have already started operation. And the 7 factories will be officially inaugurated in May this year. So the investors keep coming, and they're investing because they see the potential. They see the raw materials available, there's labor available, there's great geography, transport, logistics, and there are export markets and domestic market. The whole Karabakh is going, and Eastern Zangezur are going to be restored and developed for the foreseeable future. There are master plans available for almost all of the cities in that area up to 2040. So I think that's a good enough investment horizon for investors. So that's why there are jobs being opened up every day as we speak. And that's, I think, what gives us hope that with the supply of jobs, and of course the human capital available, the demand for these jobs, we can actually play this coordinating, matchmaking, sort of market making, sort of we can identify the suitable, sustainable jobs for the returning IDPs. Well, of course, we do. We do certain efforts internationally through our, of course, diplomatic offices, our embassies. We have specialized entity called ASPROMO under the Ministry of Economy, who is actually doing a great job in promoting the investment opportunities in the liberated territories. But I have to be honest with you. I think really it doesn't, to me, it seems like it doesn't require that much effort, because there's quite a high level of awareness about all these opportunities that are happening on the ground. I mean, there are some traditional players, of course, like Turkey, Russia, the countries of the region, Central Asia, Middle East. They're well aware of what's happening in the region, and of course the investors are well informed, and they are approaching, and they're trying to find suitable projects for them. But I have to say that we are receiving requests from more distant countries, European countries, even companies from US. And Far East. And some of this projects, some of this interest inquiries have been already materialized. We have a number of projects now being implemented by those foreign companies. For example, I can tell you that 2 villages are being built with technical expertise of Slovakian and Hungarian companies. In Aghdam, it's Slovakian company. In Jabrail, which is part of Eastern Zangezur economic region, it's an Hungarian company who are actually providing their know-how because these companies and these countries possess certain competitive edge in certain specific technical areas, those villages will be built by their companies. So, and of course, in terms of project development, detailed master plan project development, we have a number of architects from different countries who actually are very intrigued because the magnitude and the standards of restoration in Karabakh, they're actually quite impressive. I mean, when coming back to your earlier question, when we started, when we were at the very outset of the project, the whole process, there was one of the fundamental questions were, what would be the standard of restoration? And the options were, like we have one standard, which is Baku. You see, Baku is probably one of the most beautiful cities in the world, very modern, while preserving its authenticity and its cultural, substance. We have another standard of regional urban areas, which are in the past 20 years have become quite modern with the modernized infrastructure. And then, of course, there is one reference back to what was there 30 years ago before occupation. So that was another option, which was scratched off immediately because, this 30 years happened in an amazingly interesting period of time. And I always say that when in attempt to compare Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict over Karabakh, we have to really pay attention to one important nuance, that this 30 years of occupation happened at the end of the 20th and the beginning of 21st century. At the turn of 20th century, when a lot of things changed. The world has changed. The fourth industrial revolution, the whole information era, the technological development. I mean, we didn't have mobile phones at the time of occupation. We didn't know that it's possible to make a video call at that time. And look, now it seems so ordinary to us that we say, okay, well, it's one of our part of our life, so much embedded into our lives that we find it quite natural. But at the time, I mean, there were no such technologies. Supercomputers, robotics, big data, artificial intelligence. So the whole world has changed, and that also changed people, their mindset about how they comprehend the world, even in such small things like living space. We used to live in small Soviet-type apartments. And of course, Azerbaijan as a country, Azerbaijan's economy has tripled over this 30 years. By the way, despite the fact that Azerbaijan started economic reforms much later than most of the post-Soviet countries and Eastern European countries. We gained independence in 91, but we started economic reforms only in 93 with the return of our great national leader. Because all this 2 years, 3 years, we were under military aggression, a strong political chaos. So we were late starters, but then we outperformed everyone. In just by 2005, we managed to restore pre-91 level of GDP. By 2008, we doubled it, and by 2014, we tripled it. So I think the people with the increased welfare, their mindset have changed. And of course, the whole world, in parallel, the whole world has been evolving with all that technology. Of course, that made an impact. Now, people don't want to live in those tiny spaces anymore. There are better technologies, better products available. So they actually look at things, look around differently. And therefore, we scratched off that first option. Then there were two options available. And of course, His Excellency, Mr. President, made a very strong statement that became a motto, that we will turn Karabakh into paradise. And that set a standard. So that's a standard. And it may sound, what is the notion of paradise? Well, paradise is the best available technology, sustainable, the best available urban planning standards that world knows. So we're going to use the best that is available. And that's what's been happening since then. Not entirely on Karabakh Economic Region. Of course, we also can say that there's a huge potential for renewables, especially in hydro and solar. But in Eastern Zengezur, I think there's more potential for solar, hydro, as well as geothermal energy and wind energy. So in that sense, Eastern Zengezur Economic Region is much more prone to be exploring these opportunities. But in Aghdam and Fuzuli, we have quite a large number of sunny days. Almost like in Aghdam, we have like 272 sunny days based on the 50 years data. Yeah, we have huge potential, and this potential is being materialized. As you're probably aware, we have one smart village already built in Agali, in Zengilan, which is using renewable energy as a source of their electricity. They have this so-called Archimedean device, a big turbine, which actually uses the potential of Hakkari River and to generate electricity. So that electricity is more than what that village needs. So they actually end up with excess energy, so that which can be used for other purposes. So in the second smart village, which is this time going to be in the Karabakh Economic Region, in Fuzuli, a village called Devletyarlı, the project envisages to have a large solar power station, power plantation, is going to be generating energy from solar, and that will be also in excess of the needs of the village itself. So that actually adds up to plans for generation of renewable energy. Minister of Energy is leading some discussions, negotiations with Masdar, but it's not decided on yet. But there are other initiatives, like BP is planning to build this mega solar power station in Jibril. We have about 8 hydropower plants have been completely rehabilitated, restored, and they're actually adding up to the generation capacity of Azerbaijan. And this process is going to continue. And of course, one of the key important factors is that water, water is a problem nowadays all over the world. And about 30% of our water resources are located in the liberated territories, and most of them are originating in our territory. So we're not dependent on anyone, and that will help us to use that for renewable generation, renewable energy generation, B for very productive agriculture. One thing is for sure, that they have vandalized the area, our natural resources. Of course, they exploited them, and they exploited them carelessly, and they made significant damage to the environment, which they really didn't care about. Of course, this is not, you can't even call it an exploitation, it's misexploitation. Because the way they did it, it just ruined our rivers, poisoned our soils. They chopped about 60,000 hectares of forests And some of the rivers have been dried out, and it's going to be impossible to restore them. There's a lot of underwater wells, we call it kahris, that are quite unique. They are both an historical and cultural monument, masterpiece. People used to rely on these sources of water for many centuries, from ancient times. So, these are underground waters that actually have certain streams, and once found, people would, dig wells to use that as a source of water. And, it's also a very good attraction, touristic attractions. So most of them have been destroyed. And of course, some of them, there's a very sustained effort right now by the government to restore some of them using international organizations' help. So, yes, we still have quite abundant resources in liberated territories, that's true. We're going to be very careful in using them so that for us, environment and green energy, green zone are very important. You can't invent something surprising out of nowhere. Everything has to be based on certain advantages. Some famous economists call it differently, but we can say that our heritage in terms of geography, in terms of raw materials, natural resources, in terms of climate, weather, they all provide some kind of natural endowments, and that's why you have to use that natural endowments to build on them in order to be competitive in certain areas. And if you are competitive, then of course that's where you're going to specialize in. Now, as you know, I mean, the whole area has been vandalized, scratched off, wiped out. So, we have to start somewhere. The starting point was to look at which area has what competitive advantage in what. So we've, Ministry of Economy has done a great work with the international consultants. They have identified competitive advantage for each region. For example, Aghdam used to be a very important regional manufacturing, agro-processing centers in Azerbaijan. They're very entrepreneurial people. They love trade, and they actually had a very good fertile land, but they also had good manufacturing industrial base. So they combined it and they created great agro-processing cluster. So as a manufacturing and industrial and agricultural cluster, Aghdam could be a competitive area. In Fuzuli, since Fuzuli is located somewhere, at the, connection of all the major transport corridors, it can be a logistics hub with the airport there built in just over 8 months. So Fuzuli could be a good area to specialize in services. In Kalbajar, it's great mountainous area, ideal for ski resort. And there's thermal waters, as you know, there's hot water, hot springs coming out of the ground in Kalbajar. So that could be good for health sanatoriums, for health tourism. In Shusha, this is our cultural capital. Its history, its culture, it's all those, famous people that came out of this city. Amazing. So that could be good for cultural tourism. And of course, there are areas like, Kubatli, Zengilan, which are good for agriculture, and of course Jabrail, which are very one of the most suitable places for renewable solar energy production. And all of these specializations are at play. However, of course, we are going to be specific in terms of our role, because this is ultimately what the investor will decide. And investor is much better at managing its resources than the government. So the private sector is interested in actually investing in most of these areas. Mostly, as I said, in Aghdam manufacturing, there's a lot of interest in agriculture, in tourism, and of course some different types of tourism. Even as we speak now, we've had a number of tourists coming in. Those are specific types of tourists. They're kind of called dark tourism.
Yes.
They're interested to come and visit war-affected zones. It is. We've had like 5 or 6 trips of world-renowned travelers coming in to all the liberated territories. They came to Aghdam, they came to Zengilan, they went to Shusha, Lachen. So it's quite substantial. And I'm not counting those individuals who are actually coming, not as a group, but as an individual. He is very skillful in both, business mindset, in terms of business mindset, as well as in terms of macroeconomy, with the microeconomic foundations. I find it amazing that he possesses this quite extended spectrum of skills in all these very specific scientific areas. But he has also quite a rich experience himself, as you rightly mentioned. So I think that I've had a number of occasions when he came up with the decisions that actually I could then think over, and I can say that, okay, well, this is probably going to be a beginning of a big cluster. So the idea to establish 2 industrial parks in the liberated territories, one in Aghdam, another one in Jabrail, was not very, a surprise. It was not coincidence. So that had really a lot of background thinking behind it. Aghdam, being previously a regional power in terms of manufacturing, had that tradition that could be restored, and with the available natural endowments like natural resources, raw materials base, and proximity to the rest of Azerbaijan, could actually bring it back, its fame. It can bring that fame back. Jabrail is in such a place which is actually close to all the transport corridors, and logistics centers being established there can boost the services for all this traffic, all this transit, and create jobs. So I think that's a lot of. We can say that we're lucky that when we speak, and we do speak in at times, I have to admit, and that's a wrong thing to do. Sometimes we tend to use different terminologies. You get amazed that he understands you clearly, without getting into technical details. So I believe the entire, coming back to your first question, the plan, I think the plan was on his mind, from the very start. And he actually leads us in the right direction, us not knowing really about it, but closer, further we go in terms of restoring and developing these liberated territories, I get the understanding that, okay, this is what he had in mind, and I get amazed. For example, in Aghdam, we all say this is going to be one of the biggest cities in the liberated. In fact, it is the biggest city in the liberated territory, with 100,000 population to be by 2040. And you see it. One thing is to look at it as a master plan on the map. Another thing, when actually city is now emerging from all these ruins, it is actually emerging, and you can see the first initial boundaries of the city, the roads, the buildings, and then you can say, okay, well, this is really, truly impressive. And this is what he had in mind. And I just pray to God that we are able to complete this project as he had in mind, because now I'm more and more convinced that this is going to be amazing project, amazing city. We see that beneficial to every country of the region. We believe this is an opportunity, and we are offering this opportunity. We've been offering it for all along. We believe it would be naive and amateurish to reject that offer, because I think everyone knows by now that Azerbaijan is the leading country of this region of South Caucasus, and our economy is going to be driver for many economies, and will have a positive impact on most of the countries in the region, and we can play that integrating, consolidating role in terms of economic development of the entire region. But of course, we cannot force it. All the countries will need to understand their best national interests, including economic interests. And they have to be willing to participate in it. You can't force. And of course, we have offered this opportunity in a number of formats. There were a number of formats available on the desk, 3+3, 3+2. There are other formats available, but this, regional cooperation, I think it's a must. But if Armenia decides that it doesn't want to be part of it, I think we will lose nothing. We will implement and realize our projects, our economic ambitions, as we have so far, whether Armenia is in the process or not. But of course, I think they would make a big mistake.